Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling personally attacked over something small? Maybe it was a casual comment, a disagreement, or even just a look that didn't sit right with you. Why do some words or actions feel like a personal attack while others brush it off with ease? The answer isn't in what was said, it's in how we receive it. In a world full of opinions, criticism, and conflicting perspectives, the people who thrive are not the ones who avoid offense, but the ones who learn how to navigate it. So, how do we develop thicker skin without hardening our hearts? How do we stay open, kind, and light while also becoming unshaken by negativity? Let's talk about it. Criticism is inevitable. No matter who you are, what you do, or how hard you try to get things right, someone, somewhere, will have something to say about it. And for most of us, criticism stings. It feels personal, it feels unfair, it triggers our defenses and makes us want to fight back, shut down, or prove ourselves. But what if we stopped seeing criticism as an attack? What if we saw it as information, as feedback, as something that when approached with the right mindset could actually make us better? The problem is that we often assume that criticism is meant to harm us, that every negative comment is designed to tear us down. But not all criticism is an attack. In fact, a lot of it isn't even about us. It's about the perspective, experiences, and biases of the person delivering it. And even when it is about us, it doesn't have to be something we take personally. Let's break it down. There are three kinds of criticism: constructive, misguided, and malicious. And how we handle each one determines our level of emotional resilience. 1. Constructive criticism, the kind that helps us grow. Some criticism is actually meant to help. It's the kind of feedback that highlights a blind spot we didn't see, points out an area for improvement, or gives us insight into how we can do better. But even constructive criticism can be hard to hear because it forces us to confront something uncomfortable, the idea that we're not perfect. Our first instinct is often to reject it, to get defensive, to justify our actions. But if we're serious about growth, about learning, about becoming better, we have to be open to this kind of criticism. Because the reality is, no one grows without feedback. Think about the best athletes in the world. They have coaches who critique their every move. The best musicians, they take lessons from people who point out their weaknesses. The best leaders, they seek advice from those who challenge them. The difference between people who improve and people who stay stuck is simple. One group listens, the other resists. So, the next time someone offers criticism that seems well-intended, ask yourself, is there truth in this? Is this feedback coming from someone I respect? Could this help me improve if I were open to it? Because if the answer is yes, then the only thing standing in the way of your growth is your willingness to listen. 2. Misguided criticism, the kind that reflects the other person, not you. Then there's the criticism that isn't necessarily meant to hurt, but also isn't completely accurate. It comes from people who may not fully understand your journey, your decisions, or your perspective. This kind of criticism is tricky because it often feels personal even when it's not. It can come from family members who don't understand your career choices, friends who don't see the full picture of a decision you made, colleagues who assume they know more than they do. It's easy to get offended by this type of criticism, to feel misunderstood, frustrated, or even discouraged. But the truth is, not all opinions are equally valuable. Just because someone has an opinion doesn't mean it's the right one for you. So instead of reacting emotionally, try filtering misguided criticism with these questions. Does this person truly understand my situation? Are they offering advice based on facts or assumptions? Is their feedback relevant to my goals? Sometimes misguided criticism can still have some value. It might make you see something from a different angle. But other times, it's just noise. And part of building resilience is learning to separate wisdom from distraction. 3. Malicious criticism, the kind that should be ignored. And then there's the worst kind of criticism, the kind that isn't meant to help, isn't coming from a place of understanding, and has no value other than to tear you down. This is the criticism that comes from people who are unhappy with themselves, people who criticize not because they care, but because they want to feel powerful, in control, or superior. The internet is full of it. Social media has made it easier than ever for people to throw out opinions without thinking, to insult others without consequence, to bring people down just for the sake of it. And yet, so many people let these kinds of comments get to them. They let nameless, faceless critics online ruin their confidence. They let a single negative comment overshadow 100 positive ones. But here's the truth. Hurt people hurt people. People who are truly confident, happy, and fulfilled don't waste time tearing others down. The ones who do, they're often dealing with their own insecurities, their own frustrations, their own struggles. So when you receive this kind of criticism, don't take it personally. Take it as proof that you're doing something that matters. Because the people who make the biggest impact in the world, the innovators, the leaders, the trailblazers, they all have critics. Instead of wasting energy trying to fight back, simply ask yourself, does this criticism serve me? If the answer is no, let it go. Turning criticism into power. The moment we stop seeing criticism as an attack and start seeing it as feedback, everything changes. It stops being something that weakens us and becomes something that strengthens us. Not all criticism deserves our attention, but when we learn to process it with a clear mind, when we learn to take what's useful and discard the rest, we become untouchable. Because at the end of the day, it's not what people say about us that defines us. It's how we choose to respond. There's a fine line between ego and confidence, but the difference between the two is everything. One builds us up in a way that is strong and sustainable. The other sets us up for inevitable collapse. One is rooted in self-worth. The other is fragile and easily threatened. Ego demands respect. Confidence earns it. Ego reacts to criticism. Confidence listens to it. Ego seeks validation, confidence knows its own value, and yet for many of us, ego disguises itself as confidence. We think that standing our ground, proving ourselves, and refusing to back down makes us strong. But more often than not, it just makes us defensive, insecure, and unable to grow. So how do we tell the difference? How do we move from ego-driven reactions to true confidence? It starts by understanding the habits that hold us back. Ego feeds on approval. Confidence thrives on self-awareness. Ego is dependent on external validation. It constantly asks, do they like me? Do they respect me? Do they think I'm good enough? It craves recognition, applause, and approval from others to feel whole. Confidence, on the other hand, doesn't need outside affirmation. It isn't built on what people think, it's built on who you are. A confident person walks into a room and doesn't feel the need to impress everyone. They don't constantly adjust themselves to be more likable. They don't over-explain their value. They simply exist as themselves, knowing that their worth isn't tied to how others perceive them. The problem with ego is that it's never satisfied. If we live by external validation, then we are always at the mercy of other people's opinions. We feel great when people praise us, but the moment criticism comes, our confidence crumbles. And that's because it wasn't confidence at all, it was ego, disguised as strength. The real question to ask yourself is, if no one acknowledged me, would I still believe in myself? If the answer is no, then it's not confidence you're working with, it's ego. Ego fears criticism. Confidence seeks growth. Ego hates being questioned. It sees criticism as an attack, a personal insult, something that threatens its sense of worth. That's why people with big egos often get defensive, shut down, or push back aggressively when someone challenges them. Confidence, on the other hand, welcomes feedback. It understands that being questioned is not the same as being diminished. Confident people don't assume they know everything. They are willing to listen, to learn, to adapt. Think about the most respected leaders, mentors, and high performers in the world. They're the ones who actively seek out ways to improve. They don't get offended when someone points out a flaw. Instead, they lean in. They ask themselves, is there truth in this? Ego says, I'm already great, I don't need to change. Confidence says, I can be great, and I'm always willing to get better. That's the difference. Ego protects itself at all costs. Confidence allows itself to be vulnerable. Because true strength isn't about always being right, it's about being open to growth. Ego creates distance. Confidence builds connection. The bigger the ego, the harder it is to form real connections with others. Why? Because Ego constantly needs to be right, be admired, be above others. It thrives on hierarchy, on proving superiority. Confidence, however, doesn't need to be above anyone. It has nothing to prove, so it doesn't see relationships as competitions. Instead of trying to dominate conversations, confident people listen. Instead of trying to one-up others, they support. Instead of trying to control how others see them, they simply show up as they are. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they aren't the loudest ones in the room. They aren't the ones constantly seeking attention. They're the ones who make you feel seen, heard, valued. That's confidence. Ego separates us. It makes us defensive, arrogant, and difficult to approach. Confidence connects us. It makes us relatable, open, and secure enough to celebrate others without feeling threatened. The most magnetic people in the world aren't the ones constantly proving themselves. They're the ones who don't need to. Ego holds grudges, confidence lets go. One of the biggest signs of an ego-driven person is their inability to let things go. Ego takes everything personally. It remembers every slight, every insult, every perceived disrespect. It replays old conversations, fuels grudges, and refuses to move on. Confidence, however, doesn't need to hold on to resentment because it doesn't need constant validation to feel secure. Confident people understand that not every battle is worth fighting, not every disagreement needs a winner, and not every criticism requires a response. They know that carrying bitterness doesn't make them stronger, it just makes them heavier. Think about how much energy we waste being offended, replaying negative interactions in our heads, or proving a point to people who don't even matter. Confidence allows us to release that weight. It says, I know who I am, I don't need to hold on to this. Ego clings to the past, confidence moves forward, ego is fragile, confidence is unshakable. At its core, ego is weak. It might appear strong on the outside, but it's easily broken. It's why people with big egos react so dramatically when they're challenged, because their self-worth is built on something unstable. Confidence, on the other hand, is unshakable because it isn't built on fragile ground. It doesn't depend on others. It isn't afraid of being questioned. It doesn't rise and fall with praise or criticism. And that's the ultimate test. Ego says, I need to prove my worth. Confidence says, I already know my worth. We often hear about emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage emotions. But there's another concept that is just as important, if not more, emotional agility. Emotional agility is the ability to navigate emotions without getting stuck in them. It's the difference between being controlled by feelings and being able to move through them with intention. It's the ability to recognize what we're feeling, process it effectively, and then choose our response rather than reacting impulsively. Most people believe they are at the mercy of their emotions, that if something upsets them, they have to be upset, that if they feel disrespected, they must react with anger, that if they are disappointed, they should stay discouraged. But the truth is, emotions are not commands. They are signals, and the better we become at interpreting those signals, the more control we gain over our lives. Emotions are data, not directives. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about emotions is that they are absolute truths, that feeling something automatically makes it real. But emotions, while valid, are not always accurate. For example, feeling unappreciated, it might just mean you're exhausted and need rest. Feeling offended doesn't always mean someone meant to insult you. It might mean their words triggered an unresolved insecurity. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't always mean your situation is impossible. It might just mean you need to take a step back and prioritize. The key to emotional agility is learning to separate what we feel from what is actually true. Because when we treat every emotion as a fact, we lose our ability to think clearly. Instead of saying, I feel this way, so it must be true, emotionally agile people ask, I feel this way, what does that tell me? It's a simple shift, but a powerful one. It takes us from being passive passengers in our emotional experience to being active interpreters of it. The space between feeling and reacting. Imagine you're driving on a highway and someone cuts you off. Your immediate emotional response might be anger. You feel disrespected, maybe even personally attacked, and in that split second you have a choice. React immediately, honk your horn aggressively, yell inside your car, maybe even speed up to teach them a lesson. Pause, recognize your frustration, take a breath, and ask yourself, is this worth my energy? That tiny moment between emotion and reaction is where emotional agility lives. Most of us and don't realize we have that space. We go straight from feeling to reacting without questioning if our response is actually helpful. But when we develop emotional agility, we become masters of that space. We learn to pause, to assess, to decide, because not every feeling needs a reaction. Not every situation requires an emotional outburst. Not every criticism deserves a defensive response. The most emotionally agile people in the world aren't the ones who never feel strong emotions. They are the ones who know how to experience them without being ruled by them. Responding versus reacting. There's a major difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is impulsive. It's driven by emotion in the moment, often without much thought. It's snapping at a loved one when you're frustrated. It's sending an angry email before thinking it through. It's letting a bad mood dictate your entire day. Responding is intentional. It takes into account the bigger picture. It's taking a breath before replying to a difficult message. It's stepping away from a heated conversation to collect your thoughts. It's recognizing that a bad morning doesn't have to turn into a bad day. Emotionally agile people don't suppress their emotions. They acknowledge them, but they don't let them dictate their actions. They understand that just because they feel something strongly doesn't mean they have to act on it immediately. A simple but powerful rule to remember is pause before you respond. The difference between reacting in anger and responding with clarity is often just a few seconds of breathing room. Letting go of emotional rigidity. The opposite of emotional agility is emotional rigidity. The inability to adapt to emotions in a healthy way. People who are emotionally rigid tend to cling to old narratives. They define themselves by past experiences and refuse to see things from a new perspective. Hold on to grudges. They replay negative experiences over and over, keeping themselves stuck in resentment. Avoid discomfort at all costs. They suppress difficult emotions instead of learning how to work through them. But emotional agility is about flow. It's about being able to feel emotions fully without getting stuck in them. It's about moving through difficult feelings instead of avoiding them or letting them take over. Think of emotions like a river. When we allow them to flow naturally, when we acknowledge them, process them, and then let them pass, we stay light, we stay free. But when we fight them, resist them, or try to control them, we create dams that block our ability to move forward. The most resilient people aren't the ones who never feel negative emotions. They are the ones who allow emotions to come and go without getting trapped in them, releasing the need for control. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with emotional agility is that they try to control everything. How people treat them, what others think of them, what situations unfold around them. But emotional agility requires us to accept that we cannot control everything. Only our response to it. We cannot control how people behave, what people say to us, the challenges life throws our way, but we can control how much power we give those things over us, how we interpret situations, how we choose to respond. The moment we stop trying to control everything around us and start focusing on how we navigate it, we gain emotional freedom. We stop wasting energy on things we can't change. We stop letting small inconveniences ruin our mood. We stop carrying emotional burdens that aren't ours to hold. Emotional agility isn't about never feeling frustrated, angry, or hurt. It's about not letting those emotions own us. It's about developing the flexibility to experience emotions fully and still move forward. For most of us, being right feels good. It gives us a sense of control, a feeling of competence, and in many cases, a boost to our ego. We grow up in a world that rewards being correct, good grades in school, praise for having the right answers, validation when we prove our point in an argument. But here's the problem. The need to be right can be one of the biggest obstacles to growth, connection, and emotional resilience. When we cling to being right at all costs, we stop listening, we stop learning, we stop seeing things from other perspectives, and in the process, we limit ourselves not just in our personal relationships, but in our ability to evolve as individuals. Letting go of the need to be right doesn't mean we stop having opinions. It doesn't mean we don't stand up for our values, What it means is that we stop making being right more important than understanding, growth, and meaningful connection. Why do we crave being right? The need to be right is often not about truth, it's about identity, ego, and ego protection. If we admit we were wrong, it can feel like a blow to our self-worth. We equate being incorrect with being less than, when in reality, the strongest people are the ones who can admit when they don't know something. Fear of uncertainty, when we're right, we feel in control, we feel secure, but uncertainty, admitting we don't have all the answers, can feel uncomfortable. Social conditioning. From a young age, we are rewarded for being right and often punished or embarrassed for being wrong. Over time, we begin to associate being incorrect with failure rather than an opportunity to learn. Emotional investment. Sometimes we become so emotionally invested in an idea, a belief, or an argument that backing down feels impossible. It becomes about winning, not about truth. But when we prioritize being right over being open, we miss opportunities to grow, to connect, and to expand our perspective. The cost of always needing to be right. At first glance, being right seems like a strength, but when we hold on to it too tightly, it actually weakens us. 1. It damages relationships. Think about the last time you argued with someone, not because you were looking for understanding, but because you wanted to win. How did it end? Did it bring you closer together or did it create distance? Constantly needing to be right can make people feel unheard, dismissed, or even disrespected. It sends the message, what I believe is more important than what you believe. I care more about proving my point than understanding yours. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong. Over time, this erodes trust and weakens relationships. People stop opening up. They stop engaging in deep conversations. Because nobody enjoys talking to someone who only listens to respond rather than listening to understand. 2, it limits personal growth. Growth requires flexibility. It requires being open to new ideas, new perspectives, and the possibility that we don't have all the answers. When we insist on being right, we close ourselves off to learning. We reinforce our own beliefs instead of questioning them. We stay in an echo chamber of our own ideas, never challenging our thinking. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history, from science to philosophy to leadership, came from people who were willing to admit, maybe I'm wrong. When we let go of the need to be right, we open the door to curiosity, discovery, and a deeper understanding of the world. 3, it creates unnecessary conflict. Not every disagreement needs a winner. Not every differing opinion is a battle to be fought. Yet, when we operate from a place of needing to be right, every discussion can feel like a competition. We argue over things that don't truly matter. We waste energy on proving ourselves instead of focusing on what's actually important. Ask yourself, do I really need to win this argument? Or do I need to understand the other person? Is this about the truth or is this about my ego? If I win this argument, do I actually gain anything meaningful? More often than not, the cost of proving ourselves right is greater than the benefit. The power of letting go. When we stop needing to be right, something amazing happens. We become free. Free from unnecessary stress, free from the pressure of defending every belief, every opinion, every stance we take. 1, we become better listeners. When we aren't focused on proving ourselves, we start actually hearing what others are saying. We become curious instead of combative. We ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. And in doing so, we build stronger connections with the people around us. 2, we gain perspective. No one person has the whole truth. We all see the world through our own lens, shaped by our experiences, biases, and upbringing. When we release the need to be right, we make space for new perspectives, perspectives that can challenge and expand our understanding. 3, we build emotional resilience. People who are emotionally resilient don't crumble when they're wrong. They don't feel the need to defend their ego at all costs. Instead, they recognize that being wrong is part of being human. They say things like, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. I might have been wrong about that. I don't know the answer, but I'd love to learn more. And rather than feeling embarrassed, they feel empowered. Because they understand that real strength isn't in always being right, it's in being open, adaptable, and willing to grow. Choosing growth over ego, letting go of the need to be right, doesn't mean we don't have convictions. It doesn't mean we don't stand by our values. What it means is that we prioritize growth, learning, and understanding over the need to win. The strongest people aren't the ones who prove themselves right the most. They are the ones who have the humility to question themselves, the curiosity to explore new ideas, and the wisdom to know that certainty is an illusion. Because in the end, the goal isn't to be right all the time. The goal is to be better thinkers, better communicators, and better human beings. Emotional resilience isn't about avoiding difficult emotions, silencing criticism, or proving ourselves right. It's about navigating life with a thicker skin and a lighter heart. It's about learning to see criticism as feedback, strengthening our confidence without letting ego take control, and developing the agility to move through emotions rather than being trapped by them. When we let go of the need to be right, we gain something far more valuable: the ability to grow, to connect, and to truly understand. When we stop reacting impulsively and start responding with clarity, we build stronger relationships, make better decisions, and create a life that isn't dictated by fleeting emotions. True strength isn't found in defensiveness, control, or stubbornness. It's found in openness, adaptability, and the courage to evolve. And when we embrace that, we don't just survive challenges, we thrive through them.